Welcome to At Issue. I'm H. Wayne Wilson. Thank you as always for joining us for a conversation, this time on efforts to ban books, which is not a new phenomenon in America. We can go back to the 17th century when the early Protestants and those were attempting to ban books based on religion. You can look more recently at the early 1950s when communist propaganda led to requests to ban books in America. And here we are again. In Illinois, last year there were 67 attempts to ban books. That's up from 41 the previous year. So we're going to talk about how libraries respond to that and what the duty of a library is with the four individuals who represent three different libraries in Central Illinois. Let me first introduce to you Carrie Garman. Carrie is with the Normal Public Library, where she is the Collection Development Librarian. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Also with us is Alice Jackson. Alice is the Manager of Programming for the Peoria Public Library. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Ann Reeves is here. Ann is the Director for the Eureka Public Library, and I might point out, not for too much longer.
Not for too much longer,
because
another month.
You're going to retire.
That's correct.
And your replacement will be?
Cynthia O'Neill.
Cynthia O'Neill. And also with us, Randall Yelverton. Randall is the Executive Director at the Peoria Public Library. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
And let me start with you, Randall. When we talk about how you stock shelves, whether that be film or magazines or books, what have you, there is what's called a collection development policy.
Yes.
I think I would call it just how do you stock your shelves. But can you give us an overview? And I want everybody, but I'm assuming it's going to be similar, that you stock your shelves with some policy in place.
Sure, there's some core principles at place. We want to go out and find the best materials that are available for our patrons. So we'll look at library journals, different review sources, so that we can vet these materials and make sure that we are getting some of the best information, some of the best quality materials out there. We're also going to be looking at materials that are popular and we know that our patrons are going to want to read. So there's a mix of making sure that the information is good, and then we're also providing materials that we know our patrons are going to want to read.
So you know this historically. I mean, there's a trending that you said, well, this type of book worked before.
Yes, and definitely keeping abreast of the news, trying to find information that is topical, that we know is going to be heavily promoted, because we know our patrons are going to come in asking for particular books and particular subjects based on what is trending in the media.
And similar process over at the Normal Public Library, Carrie?
I'd say yes. We call ours a materials selection policy, and it not only guides us in, for example, like our burden of what to select, but it also explains why do we collect what we do? Why do we not buy textbooks, for example? Why would it be unlikely for me to purchase a rare $200 item for the Normal Public Library circulating collection, things like that. So the point of the material selection policy is not only to guide the librarians, but also to inform the community as to, what we buy for them and sort of how long we hold on to it, and if you're a local author, are we going to purchase your item, and those sorts of things are all covered in our material selection policy, as is our process for reconsideration if someone finds that there was an item that was not to their taste.
I want to talk about how people might file a complaint in just a moment, but you used a phrase that caught my attention, the burden of selecting material. Is it a burden, or is that a phrase that you use in a library?
Well, it's actually the best thing ever. ever. I love my job. So it's not a burden in any sense, except insofar as one of the bedrock principles of library selection is to ensure that you have balance and that you are selecting for your particular community. And so in the sense that you want to know your community well, that you want to be checking constantly to ensure that what you think your community wants or needs is in fact what your community wants or needs, and what is, circulating well, to make sure that you're in sort of a lovely prolonged dialogue with your community on what they would like to see and what they would enjoy is what you are bringing in for them. So in that sense, yes, there's a burden of due diligence, one might call it, but in actuality, it is the best job in the library.
So that will be different in Peoria is a larger community, Normal is a larger community. For Eureka, a smaller community,
Right.
you may have different standards, may I say?
I'm not sure I would say standards. Obviously, our budget enters into it because we are a smaller community, and our space definitely enters into it. But through interlibrary loan, which spreads the burden throughout the whole community, we're allowed to borrow from any other library as well. We watch the trends, similar to what Randall spoke about. We also have a lot of one-on-one contact with people coming in. They tell us things that they're interested in, things they really enjoyed, that we can maybe look for more books by that author or borrow materials from other libraries if we don't have them to expand our own collection that way.
So it's not Ann Reeves making decisions. It's
No.
you've got the American Library Association standards, but it's people coming in.
We do, and I think all of us rely on the traffic that comes in the door, the circulation
Definitely.
numbers. And again, we're going to speak about it soon, but the process of removing books because you're too crowded, they're not going out anymore.
Right.
I mean, it is a collection development policy that expands from what you're going to purchase and put on the shelf to when has something aged to the point that you need that space for something else.
Is there a policy, or does that depend on the book as to, well, we got new materials coming in, we only have so much space.
Yeah.
With a lot of our libraries, even some of the larger ones, we have space issues. We're thinking it's oftentimes like retailers. We got to have new materials in that our patrons want, and in order to do that, we have to remove old materials. So we want to keep the best in what is new, and that does require sometimes removing old materials that people didn't check out, and quality of the book itself, as in condition.
Yeah, the condition, and then just seeing, maybe it is an older book, but if it's still checking out, then yes, we're going to hold on to that, or check out the condition of it to see maybe we want to replace that old title with a newer edition type of a thing. So we're not necessarily getting rid of all the old stuff to replace it with the new things. It is a burden, but it's something that we have to do.
Is there any communication amongst libraries? Because you mentioned the interlibrary loan, so you may not, because you know that Normal has that book, you don't necessarily.
Exactly. Yeah, I know. I'll speak for a couple of my coworkers. I know that's one thing when they're looking to weed, as we call it, weeding books off the shelves or DVDs or whatnot. We look to see, are we the only library in the area that has it? Is it something we should hold on to? Or are there 5 other libraries that have it, and maybe our older copy that is maybe a little worn out, maybe we can get rid of that one?
Let's get to a current issue here, Carrie, and that is there are concerns, whether that be age appropriateness or just simply people don't want to have certain books on the shelves. LGBTQ plus is one of the issues. Racism is another issue. How do you address that with any complaints that might come in?
So there's sort of a two-pronged approach there. In our material selection policy, it says very clearly something that also pops up in the Library Bill of Rights, which is a guiding principle from ALA for our profession, that says we don't censor, and that we have an obligation at Normal, but just as library professionals, to represent everyone in the community. So right in the material selection policy, it will tell you we are going to reflect the community that we serve. So that's an important piece there. And then what we have found is, I mentioned before that collection development is really a process of a prolonged relationship, a prolonged discussion, in a sense, with you and your community about the materials that you get for them, whether they're requesting something or objecting to something. So the first step in any concern about a material is to talk to the patron and to listen and say, tell me more. What was it specifically that upset you about this item, or what are your concerns? Because sometimes what people say first is not the heart of their concern about the item. So I want to make sure that I'm understanding, or that the staff member who takes that concern from them, that we are hearing them and understanding them and reflecting that concern back to them. And then often, I think, in the process of reconsideration, that's what the patron wants more than anything else, is to feel heard and to say, why did you buy this for the library? And I truly enjoy getting the opportunity to talk to a patron and say, you know, I bought this book because of this particular reason for this particular population. And as part of our formal process, where we call it a request for reconsideration, we also ask our patrons, hey, if you don't approve of this item, why not? Have you been through the whole thing? Have you read it? Have you fully viewed it? What would you suggest instead? And that's a very interesting moment for me as a selector, as well as for me as a librarian, where you can sit back and think, do we really have a hole in our collection in this area? Is there maybe something that I should purchase for the community that we don't have now? I am always glad to get that information.
Randall,
Yes.
A similar situation at Peoria in terms of how you deal with complaints? And I know that there's a formal complaint process,
Yes.
but quite often it's just someone coming in at first and saying, why do you have this book or this movie, magazine, what have you? Because it represents LGBTQ characters in it. And my young children, I don't want them exposed to that. But I assume you have to satisfy a broad spectrum of audience.
Sure. As Carrie was saying, we want to make sure our collection is reflective of our community. And oftentimes when a patron will come in with a complaint about a book, we have an excellent staff, excellent management team who are good at engaging in that conversation, talking to them about the material. And oftentimes that conversation helps inform the patron as to why our collection is as it is, and that can be an instructive moment, and they can walk away with a better knowledge of why our collection is, and sometimes it won't move on to that challenge policy.
How often do you get a challenge, a formal challenge?
Very rarely. I probably had about one each year that I've been a librarian. I think we're very privileged here in Central Illinois. I think a lot of our patrons understand the rights and responsibilities of being a library user, and appreciate those rights and responsibilities. So,
Carrie, how often do you get a formal complaint?
I would say in terms of formal complaints, maybe 1 a year, and we have not as yet been through our entire formal process for any individual item.
And your library is in a smaller community, about 5,300 people, much smaller than normal or
Right.
Peoria. Number one, how many complaints do you get? And number two, do you view this a little bit differently in terms of the types of books you may get because of the community that you are in?
I think the discussion we had earlier about collection development fits us as well. We have 5 on staff that are trained professional librarians. So when we choose materials, we look at the diversity available to us when we bring materials in. We do have some complaints, some people that come in and ask for reconsideration on materials. And I think, like what Carrie said, it's a good time to learn. Talk to the person, find out what maybe bothered them about that material. Make sure that we're on the same page, so to speak, as far as, is it language, is it pictures, is it the overall theme of the story? So we look at those opportunities as a learning time. A lot of our material selection is also based age-wise. So a discussion that happens with our children's librarian or youth services librarian might be slightly different than the one that we would have with an adult.
I want to turn to Alice because there's a community reads program. It changed a little bit here in the last couple of years, but 2 years ago, I guess it was, the book was The Hate You
The Hate You
Give.
Give.
And there were a few people who were a little upset with it. Why?
So the book is about police brutality. That's what it comes down to. A young man is killed by a police officer. That was and is a very timely topic. A lot of the complaints, though, actually lean towards the language in the book, because it is a young adult book, a YA book for teens, and people didn't think that the language was appropriate for the age group that the book was aimed at.
But the language was representative of what the issue was in the book?
I would definitely say so, yes. And the characters in the book it's mainly teenagers, or at least the main character is a teenager, and it's just life. It is representative of the way teens speak.
So Carrie, how do you divide the library up in normal in terms of age appropriateness? There may be some books that are okay for adults, but you wouldn't want fourth graders reading it. Is there a division? How do you decide what books are available to what readers?
You know, that's such an interesting point. So we do actually at Normal have a bit of a physical division in our collection, in the sense that our children's collection is kept on the second floor of the library, and our adult and young adult materials, as well as large print and things like that, are kept on the first floor of the library. So there is that physical division. But it's interesting what you say about age appropriateness, because to me, one of the other bedrock principles of both selection and librarianship is that we cannot act in loco parentis. We cannot act in a parent's role. So you're not going to find me taking a book or an item out of the hands of a child or a young adult and saying, you can't have that, that's not right for you. Because to do that, I would be taking away the privilege of their parent or guardian to decide what is appropriate for that person, what they think is appropriate for their family or family values. That is not my place to do. And so that's why I believe so strongly in how important it is for parents and guardians to come with the young people in their life and help them select materials or to talk about materials together. I think that's one of the wonderful privileges of parenting. And it's just not for me to do.
Mm-hmm. We've had that discussion many times, that if a child comes up with a book that is obviously an adult book, so look at the topic, look at what the subject matter is, and make another suggestion. Oh, you know what? This one might be more interesting to you. But like Carrie said, you're not going to say, oh, you can't check that out. It's not our job.
I mean, one of our core principles is we support the right of a parent and an individual to choose what is right for themselves and their families, but not to make that decision for the whole community. That's kind of that's what it comes down to in these questions of book removal from the library, book banning, taking particular books out. Sometimes it's making that decision, the individual trying to make that decision for the whole family.
Have you ever banned a book?
No, we've never banned a book in the library.
Carrie?
No, we never have.
Anne?
We have not.
Back to the issue of age appropriateness, because the Eureka Library is much smaller. It's all there's an old house and an extension. It's all right there.
Our children's department is actually downstairs, similar to what Carrie spoke about.
But they are free to come into the main
sure.
library on the main floor
Yes.
and choose a book.
Right. I believe probably what Carrie said really wraps it up well. That's a parent's responsibility and a joy, honestly. To introduce your children to books is just the best thing. To be able to share that with them, and that's what we encourage. And if they feel like, if they're there with their 10-year-old and they, especially in our nonfiction area, feel like we my child's going to read much faster, much further, much deeper than what we would have in our children's department. Oh my goodness, you open up a whole world to them if they're a good reader, and they can come upstairs and experience, for us come upstairs, experience something on a different level.
There are movies that have topics, language, etc., that can be viewed as objectionable by some families. Music. How do you handle that particular aspect of a particular film, Alice, that might...
Again, I go back to, like, if a child brings up a book or whatever it may be, I, as a parent, that would be my response to say, let's find something that might be of a little more interest to you. Or hopefully look to see that they're with a parent and direct that to the parent to make that decision. Because again, like we said, it doesn't fall to us as librarians. We're not in local parentis. We can't do the censorship.
There was a bill that I don't believe the governor's signed it yet, Randall.
That's correct. I think it's very close to happening from what I read, though.
2789, it's a House bill. And it says that public libraries will not get state grants, and I believe those come through Janulius's office, Alex Janulius. And it says that you can't get a grant if you don't follow the American Library Association's standards. I mean, that's real simple.
Yeah, it asks us as librarians to affirm that, have our boards affirm that, that we are adhering to those standards as to how we are collecting and disseminating materials. And doing so will allow us to continue to receive those state grants.
6 states this year have passed laws. Now, I'll grant you 2 of those states, the governor vetoed the legislation, but 6 state legislatures passed laws this year that said that librarians, the 4 of you, could be subject to fines and or imprisonment for providing, and the definition was harmful material to the readership. How concerned are you that there are 6 states that actually passed legislation like this, Randall? I mean, directed at, now Illinois wasn't one of them,
Yes.
I'll say that, but if you were working in one of those 6 states, how concerning is that to you?
Certainly we're concerned for our colleagues. I mean, libraries are traditionally, we're very cooperative. We will call each other, we will work together. We share information together through the American Library Association, and then more informally, librarian to librarian. That is happening constantly. So certainly we are all depending on each other, and it does concern me that that this core function and community of a library that provides free materials to people of all kinds of different resources that could be, those librarians could be in danger for doing that.
Carrie, your reaction?
It grieves me to the heart. I know the net effect of that legislation is that there are people in those states who are not going to get the information that they need when they need it. And as a librarian, that breaks my heart. I will say it's something I feel strongly enough about that I can't think of a better reason to go to jail. Can you? So it's easy for me to say that, though. It's an Illinois librarian who is looking at the possibility of having those formal protections for Illinois librarians codified, and I'm grateful to Alexi Giannoulias for moving that forward as our state librarian. There are so many pieces of information. There are so many people who struggle to find themselves in this world that I just hate the idea that, now they might feel even more alone or have less access.
I'd like to finish the conversation with the Summer Reading Club. If we could talk, I don't. Do you all have summer reading clubs?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Real
Definitely.
briefly, Peoria.
Yes, summer reading program starts June
Officially Monday, June
Monday.
5th.
You can sign up on our website. We're having a kickoff party at our North Branch this Saturday at 11, and I know our fellow librarians have those as well. The summer reading program.
And summer reading program.
Yes, our kickoff party starts at 4 this afternoon.
Well, when we say this
So-
afternoon, that may
Right.
already be past.
That might be
But
fast,
there is a
right.
summer reading
There
program.
is a summer reading program. It usually runs, and it will run over 6 weeks this year, and then we move into a secondary program to continue to encourage reading.
And Carrie,
throughout the
real
summer.
quickly, summer reading program.
Absolutely. Kicks off today. It's for adults, teens, and kids.
Kicked
So
off
excited.
today as we taped this.
Yes.
Yes, June 1st. June 1st.
And with that,
yes.
we're out of time. Let me say thank you
Thank
very
you.
much to Ann Reeves, who is with the Eureka Library, Carrie Garman, who is with the Normal Public Library, Randall Yelverton at the Peoria Library, and Alice Jackson also at the Peoria Public Library. And thank you for the conversation. We hope that you find a summer full of reading in front of you. We'll be back in a couple of weeks with another edition of At Issue. This time we'll be talking about a rift in the Methodist Church. We'll talk about that on the next At Issue.